Say hello to the Mi-24D. This is Russia's Tier 5 premium helicopter, and it is currently placed at a battle rating of 9.7. Now, at the time of making this video, this is in fact the only premium helicopter for the Russians in War Thunder, so if you're looking to get a premium, this is your only option for the Russians. Now, the vehicle itself is of course available in a bundle pack on the Gaijin store for €39.99, and also contains 2,000 golden eagles and 15 days of premium account, which will certainly be useful for whatever you do once you get this helicopter. So to start off briefly by discussing the performance, we're going to get into the helicopter itself. Now, first off, it's clear from the start that the Hind is fast. Once it comes to its speed, you will outrun majority of the other helis in the game, certainly very useful on the large battlefields of enjoying confrontation, one of the few modes that you can actually play this vehicle in. On the other hand though, the Hind is big, meaning that in a close quarters engagement, you will be at a fair disadvantage when facing smaller and lighter helicopters, such as the AH-1 series of attack helicopters. Although with skill and useful employment of the nose-mounted turret, you can win those engagements by just getting an edge over the enemy. One last thing worth noting is actually the RPM spool speed of the engines. After a quick maneuver, your RPM does drop off, and this heli is quite heavy, so once that happens, it can take a while for the RPM to climb back up to a suitable level, and when you're at lower altitudes, flying fairly quickly, close to the ground, that can be fairly risky if all your lift effectively just bleeds off. Now, of course, this is part of the Hind series of attack helicopters. They're very well known, and of course, as you would expect, it has a very wide variety of weapon configurations. Firstly, a 12.7mm quad barrel rotary cannon mounted in a turret under the nose. As for secondary payloads, you have dual 23mm gun pods, S5K or S24 unguided rockets, and of course, the 9M17P Falanga anti-tank guided missile, which despite being called an anti-tank guided missile, will actually be useful against more or less anything you face, be that ground vehicles, aircraft, or other helicopters. Now, of course, all those weapon types can of course be arranged in a variety of configurations, which can be found in the modifications tab in the hangar or in the weapon selector prior to spawning in-game. My personal preferred payload is the final payload configuration, giving me 64 S5K rockets mounted in 2 rocket pods, 2 dual 23mm cannon pods, and 4 Falanga anti-tank guided missiles. This payload allows for very good multi-role capability, either air-to-air or air-to-ground, and effectively all of the weapons in this payload can actually be used for either of those. Even the unguided rockets can be used to take down other helicopters, or in some cases aircraft. This of course will be incredibly useful for both ground battles and of course in helicopter enduring confrontation. One last thing worth noting are the infrared countermeasures on the Hind. This is the only premium helicopter to actually feature infrared countermeasures, which are extremely useful, especially in helicopter EC, where air-to-air missiles absolutely dominate the meta. This makes the biggest threat in this game mode only a minor worry, meaning you can be much more effective. Rather than trying to avoid helis who are mounting these weapons, you can actually just get on with it and attack people or go for ground targets. So now with that slight overview done, let's actually jump into some games, starting off with some heli EC, and then we're going to move over to some ground realistic battles. So this was the first spawn in this particular EC session, and the first enemy helicopter I come across is an AH-1G Cobra, really a helicopter you will see very commonly, and in this case I quickly dispatch of him using an ATGM. Next up was an Mi-24A, also looks to be going for some ground targets, fire off an ATGM, and he's in a bit more of a tricky movement. He is turning, moving about, but luckily I'm able to keep the ATGM on target, get a solid hit into the side, and knock him out as well. And you may be thinking, why are you using the anti-tank guided missiles as an anti-helicopter system? Well, it's very simple. A lot of these helis, especially the Cobras, which have very dangerous turrets and also additional gun pods, they can be rather dangerous when they get close to you, and as I said, this heli in the agility department, not so much. So you really want to be using a guided weapon to take out these enemy helicopters at longer range before they can get close and pose a real threat, which is what I'm doing using these ATGMs in Heli EC, and you will find this is what most people do before they get hold of air-to-air missiles. Of course, some helis don't have ATGMs or any guided weaponry, but most helis do, and majority of the time you will find people using ATGMs to dispatch of enemy helicopters from longer range, where they're less of a threat. Especially this is seen with helicopters such as the Bo 105. Now, as you saw there, I used my final 2 ATGMs to take out some more enemy targets. After that, I quickly ran back to base to get some more ammunition, really. And after that, I then went over to the other side of the battlefield and decided to take out some ground targets. Of course, in EC, taking out ground targets will of course lower the enemy team's points, not by that much. For the most part in EC, you want to be capturing the capture zones when they appear, but you will occasionally take down the points a bit by destroying some ground targets. Here, taking out heavy tanks using those S5K rockets in those 2 rocket pods on the middle pylons. Of course, I also have the gun pods. The main reason I have the gun pods is for taking out lighter targets such as AA or artillery guns, or closer enemy helis. If an enemy heli gets close to me, I can then attack them using the gun pods. Of course, Mi-24P there fired an ATGM at me. I took him out first, and of course after that his ATGM lost guidance because, well, he was dead. After this, obviously, there's a little town here. We got some AA guns, fire off some rockets, at a bit too much range for the guns. The rockets tend to be easier. The splash damage will usually just take out the target with relatively small effort. Again, now a heavy tank, another heavy tank that is, and they do get the enemy points down a tiny bit. You can see those points bleeding a bit, and that was more or less it for ground attack. For the most part, Heli EC is going to consist of spawning, flying somewhere, destroying something, going back to spawn, reloading, doing it again. And in this case, this went quite well. Took out an enemy Mi-24D. Then I saw another one, bit of a later variant there. You can see you have the IR countermeasures on the exhausts of the Mi-24V. That is a later variant. The first one actually to be given air-to-air missiles, which is definitely a very good vehicle. And here's an Mi-24P. The second one to have air-to-air missiles, and it also has a fixed cannon rather than the turret. I was then of course killed by the same Mi-24P who I shot down. We both killed each other with ATGMs, and what is interesting actually is of those 3 Mi-24s that I killed, 2 of them were far more advanced than me, both the V variant and the P variant. Both of them were actually carrying air-to-air missiles, and of course they couldn't shoot me because of the infrared countermeasure. That means it's more or less impossible for them to get a lock from most angles. You will find this levels the playing field quite a bit. For most other helis, you have stuff like the AH-1Z Viper, later versions of the Mi-24, the Gazelle. These have air-to-air missiles, and for most other helis who will be playing, they will be fearing those helis. There's not much they can do to stop them killing them. But with your Mi-24D, you have the countermeasure. Their most dangerous weapon is pretty much useless against you. So this makes the playing field very level. Their second best weapon, the one that they will have to use to kill you, ATGMs. What do you also have? ATGMs. Therefore, this is really the only premium helicopter available at the time of making this video, where in Helicopter EC, it is a level playing field against the most advanced helicopters in the game. Now, whereas your helicopter battles experience in the Mi-24D may be fairly balanced, when it comes to ground battles, it's not so much the case. Of course, dispatching of normal tanks or helicopters may be fairly easy. When it comes to ground battles, there are 1 or 2 things that may be a severe thorn in your side. Firstly, SPAA. Of course, SPAA have radar majority of the time at this BR, and that can make it rather tricky for you to do your job. Of course, if they can see you, that's usually not a problem, but the issue is majority of them have surface-to-air missiles. These actually don't exactly have to get a hit. Most of them have a proximity fuse, which means if they fly even close to you, they will either just do a fair amount of damage or completely destroy your helicopter. This is not good. Now, on the other hand, of course, they will not see you if you are flying behind some kind of hard cover, be that rocks, trees, maybe even just entire hills. Try and stay away and try and hide. Obviously, in this game, I'm not doing that. I was being fairly out in the open because I could see the enemy spawns and knew that there were no SPAAs, although if I was to see one, it was likely they would have taken me out before I would have been able to get to cover. As you saw there, taken out by an aircraft. Of course, aircraft are a big threat. They go much faster than you, and also their guns will generally destroy you quite quickly. The Hind, while it is known in real life as the flying tank, it is nothing of such in War Thunder, with it being easily destroyed by a few hits from even 50 cals. As you can see in the background now, using this helicopter to destroy other helicopters is probably the most useful thing you can do for your team. Killing aircraft, it can be done, but it isn't something you should aim to do because it's far more likely the aircraft will simply kill you before you can kill them. Enemy ground vehicles, of course, you can kill them relatively easily, but so can your team on the ground. Enemy helicopters, on the other hand, at least ones such as the AH-1Z Viper, they can sit at long range and take out your team on the ground, whereas the team on the ground unless they go in an SPAA don't have much to do about that. They can't really fix that problem. You, on the other hand, you can sneak in and you can take them out with an ATGM. So really, I would say the most important thing you can do, the most useful thing you can do in your Mi-24D is take out the enemy helicopters. This is something that's not so easy for your ground team to do, but it is easy for you to do, and it doesn't put you at too much threat if you know what you're doing, which is what I was doing obviously in this game on Normandy, where I was able to take out 3 enemy helicopters. I think I'll finish by saying that at least at the time of making this video, the ground forces meta is not all that comforting to helis, which means you should probably just leave it to being a backup vehicle in your lineup. Certainly do not take it as the first thing you spawn in, and I certainly wouldn't take it over an aircraft. If you have an aircraft with ground attack ordnance, take that over the heli, because it's far more likely in the open at least you'll be able to survive an SPAA with a jet than you will with the heli, which is of course much slower. Of course though, if you find a particular situation where you feel the helicopter will be of use, take it out then, but for the most part just leave it as a backup and don't really use it. If you really want to play the heli as a vehicle that you just want to play, go in heli battles and use it there. So that more or less sums up the Mi-24D. It's a very good helicopter. I would go as far as to say it's the best of the premium helicopters. Personally, I've owned it since its original release, and I do not regret buying it one bit. I used it in the original heli game modes, now I use it in EC, and I've used it from time to time in ground battles, all of which have been a very good time. Of course, ground battles are a bit of a mixed bag, but for the most part, if you know what you're doing and you know how to avoid the SPAAs, you can do quite well in that mode. Generally, if you're looking to grind out the Russian helicopter tree specifically, I would advise this. If you're looking for a backup, I would advise first off looking at the Russian aircraft and maybe seeing if one of them would suit your playstyle better. Although if you feel this helicopter would be a good addition to your ground lineup, certainly do purchase it and give it a go. And if you don't like it in ground RB, you can always go into helicopter EC and maybe grind out some of the better helicopters such as the Mi-24V and P or the Mi-35. Anyway though, thank you very much for watching the video. If you did enjoy, please consider smashing the like button, maybe even subscribe to the channel. There will be more helicopter premium reviews in the coming months, and of course more general War Thunder content. Anyway, thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.